morning, everybody. It's on, okay. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to Busan and to the Busan National University, to the IBS Center for Climate Physics, and to our conference, the Conference on Climate and Human Evolution. So I need to find my pointer now. Here it is. Okay, before we start with the sessions, I would like to introduce a little bit the concept and motivation for this conference, and also introduce our center, the IBS Center for Climate Physics. So first of all, I would like to ask you to acknowledge and send a big round of applause to our organizing committee, Pasquale Raya, professor from University of Napoli, Zhaoyang Ruan, young scientist fellow in our center, and Elke Zeller, PhD student, and she defended her PhD thesis yesterday, just in time for the conference. And also, I would like to acknowledge the amazing support of our ICCP administrative team, who you will meet outside, and also the CPMG company. So let's please join me in welcoming you all and in acknowledging their fantastic support. A big thanks to everybody. So the motivation for this conference was essentially simple, to bring together scientists from very different disciplines to really get a better understanding of climate-induced human evolutionary changes, to advance the field of this geoanthropology or climate anthropology, geobiology, to catalyze new ideas on climate-human interactions, discuss also opportunities for joint field and modeling work, learn from each other is the most important part, create new collaborations, and maybe even plan new manuscripts together. And what's very important is this is a very young field, emerging field, and it's wonderful to see lots of young scientists get entrained and excited about this multidisciplinary research field. So we hope that we can entrain many early career researchers also in this discussion that we are going to have in this conference. So just a few words about our center, the IBS Center for Climate Physics, the hosting institution of this conference. I founded this institute in 2017, initially just with one person, and now we are 55 members from 12 different countries, including also 6 professors. And as you can see, we are right now at the orange dot, which is the lecture room of this building, and the IBS Center for Climate Physics occupies the upper 2 floors, 10th and 11th floor of this building. In 2018, we were fortunate to buy one of Korea's fastest supercomputers that helps us conduct climate model simulations of the past, present, and future. And we also launched a geochemistry isotope lab, which you have the chance actually to see and visit also during the conference. So just a few words about our science portfolio. We have different research themes: Earth system modeling, Earth system dynamics, looking more at natural climate changes, Earth system sensitivity, looking at the perturbation, the response of the Earth system to external perturbations. That could be CO2, human influences, or could also be Milankovitch cycles. Earth system predictability, where we're looking essentially at the predictability several seasons to years ahead in our climate system. Earth system history focuses more on understanding the past and reconstructing the past using speleothems in particular, and you will hear more about it later on also in the sessions. We have another research theme that focuses on this nexus between climate, life, and carbon cycle. So the logo of our center, let me see if I can, here. The logo of our center kind of symbolizes in a photographic aperture manner this multidisciplinary approach that we are taking to combine different research fields that would be, we are interested in the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the biosphere, cryosphere, and the anthroposphere. And in our center, we are trying to combine essentially different methods that would be next generation climate modeling, but also we're developing new theories of the climate system and ecological interactions. We're working on advanced statistics, we conduct field work and also lab work in our isotope geochemistry lab. So I wanted to give you a few highlights of our ongoing research, in particular here on Earth system sensitivity, simulating the future. And of course, many research centers in the world focus on this research question. If you take the usual report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, you will see many model projections, future projections, that use climate models that have a typical resolution of about 100 to 200 kilometers. So 100 kilometers is already considered to be rather high resolution. And if you looked at rainfall projections over Europe, you would see that this is pretty clunky and not very useful for many applications, for many local regional adaptation efforts and planning strategies. So this is the typical resolution, but we wanted to go beyond, and we thought, well, we have access to one of the nicest computers in Korea, so we actually went down to scales on a global, in global modeling, to 9-kilometer resolution, which is really the typical scale of regional adaptation efforts and very useful for stakeholders and so on. So what you see here is a projection of rainfall changes over Europe, but the model is a global model, so you can look anywhere in the world to see what's going to happen. So I have to say, if you are living, for instance, Kronis, living in London and Cambridge, it's going to be drier there, interestingly, for the future, but you can see the entire west coast of the British Islands is going to be much wetter. So there are lots of regional features that really come out that are otherwise not very visible in these kind of projections. Okay, so this is another illustration here. On the left-hand side, you can see a typical satellite image. On the right, you can see the model simulation at 9-kilometer, which we can run for many, many decades for present day and also future climate change conditions. So this allows us to really address questions of climate change on a very small scale. We can also use the same models for paleoclimate simulations as well. Okay, so this is another illustration, the projected temperature changes over Europe, and you can see the regional features really matter. If you're in the Alps, you will experience much stronger warming than if you're on the western side of France, for instance. So this is important to have this information because eventually planning requires detailed information on a regional scale. Okay, so this is one type of research question that we're addressing. Another one is we look back into the past. We want to understand past climate change. And for that, our team goes into caves. So here you can see some of our team members in South Korea and in Botswana drilling essentially stalagmites or flow stones. And we take these samples and analyze them with respect to the isotopic composition, trace elements, and also organic biomarkers to reconstruct past changes. And you have the opportunity to join us in for a little lab tour during the coffee breaks. So there is a sign-up sheet outside. So we can only take about 15 to 20 people at one time. And the sign-up sheet will start for the tours on Wednesday. Okay, so the speleothem samples that we have in our lab that we are currently analyzing include, of course, new samples from South Korea, China and Tibet, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, Slovenia, Morocco, Botswana, and also Greenland. So this is a very interesting geographic spotlight that we can have on different climate regions where the climate variability has not been very well understood in the past. Okay, this is just an illustration here. This is a kind of Delta 18O reconstructions of speleothem from South Korea. Here is essentially the end of the last ice age, if you want, the end of the last glacial maximum. And here we are getting into another very cold spell in the North Atlantic region, the Heinrich Event 1 period. Interestingly, what we find in a Korean speleothem is clearly this drop into this colder and drier condition. However, what we also see is that it was interrupted by a very rapid event. And knowing also from Chinese speleothems, the time period, we can then identify that there was a very clear rapid cooling of about 5 to 8 years during this Heinrich event And what caused this is, of course, an interesting question that we are exploring. And the question here in the room would, of course, be what did such a rapid event, probably cooling event and drying event, actually do to humans at that time? So there are interesting combinations of research fields that we can discuss. And we have one session also on abrupt climate change and human responses. Okay, and then the big research field that we are currently interested in here in this room is this nexus between climate and life. And this is kind of the context for our conference. And as you know, the climate system has cooled pretty much from the Pliocene all the way to the last glacial maximum. And it was interrupted by these Milankovitch cycles. Prior to the mid-Pleistocene transition, we had 20 to 40,000 year variability, depending on where you were. And then afterwards, we see the main glacial interglacial cycles with time periods of about 80 to 120,000 years. So this mid-Pleistocene transition is quite interesting because a lot of things changed. So clearly several human species kind of disappeared and others actually emerged. And interestingly, there is also some evidence that the chromosome 2 merger occurred around the time of the mid-Pleistocene transition. There is still some age uncertainty about it. But also, we are here and we have the pleasure and privilege to have some leading archaeologists also in the room. Of course, we cannot understand human evolution without understanding cultural evolution. So the interesting thing is also that during these time periods, actually, if we look at metrics of tool complexity, there were major changes that went along with this climate transition from rather moderate variability to stronger variability. So understanding how this all comes together is a huge challenge. So together with some colleagues, we wrote a paper just that came out a few months ago in Nature Reviews Earth and Environment, Past Climate Change Effects on Human Evolution. And if you're interested in this, you can download the PDF by just scanning the QR code, or we have some copies outside as well. Okay, so what really motivated my interest in this research field, human responses to past climate change, was it was a News and Views article in Nature, Time to Model All Life on Earth. And there is an interesting statement in there: no report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change would fail to mention global climate models. Yet, we cannot refer to analogous models of the world's ecosystems, including humans. So this is something that triggered my interest, and this is something that we try to address by first building using our supercomputing facilities to conduct some of the most realistic and longest climate model simulations conducted to date. And this is a 3 million year climate model simulation that we have been using essentially to drive other offline ecosystem models, such as a vegetation model. You will hear also about our efforts to simulate all mammals on our planet. An agent-based human model that includes genetics and human dispersal models. So this is just a quick illustration. There will be more talks about this. We have an entire session about how to model humans, but there are essentially three main approaches. Biogeographic models, so we look at the habitat suitability. We combine archaeological data with climate and environmental data to determine essentially the human climate niche or envelope. Then we can use reaction diffusion partial differential equation models. They essentially assume that humans are some kind of fluid, and we are looking at the density of humans as it spreads into different regions, and there is also a reaction term which captures essentially birth and death of different populations depending on the food availability. So the carrying capacity K is usually related to the climatic conditions. This is how we can enter climate essentially into the equations for human dispersal. And then agent-based models are very fascinating. Essentially, you simulate individuals. You give them certain rules. They should find some mates, have children, they give birth, they die, and so on and so forth, but they're also looking for food. So if the climate model provides the food and the food changes, also the behavior and the dispersal of these agents will change. So these are the three main research methods that we apply to simulate humans. And this is just an illustration, and you will hear more about it from our scientist who will give presentations, Xiaoyang Ran, in particular about using habitat models for Denisovans and Neanderthals to identify regions and times of overlap and potential interbreeding. So there will be more about this later. This is another teaser for work that Shiwei Fang from our center is doing. So it's an agent-based model which we ran from 2 million years ago, to 200,000 years ago. And what you can see is just over Africa, phylogenetic tree for different groups. And you can see prior to the mid-Pleistocene transition, there is a structured population, different population areas and centers. But then after this mid-Pleistocene transition, things have gotten colder and drier. We can see that the structure of the population has changed dramatically. And this is also illustrated in a drop in the genetic diversity here. So prior we have warm and wet, which leads to multi-regional habitats. And afterwards we have a collapse of genetic diversity triggered by colder and drier conditions. So there will be also more about this later on. But this is just an illustration of the kind of research that we're conducting in our center. And one other big question is, of course, I mentioned cultural adaptation, cultural complexity, and cultural evolution is really important to understand human responses to external factors, stresses. And so we take a very strange approach here, I would say. So coming from a climate background, we can of course think about the weather essentially as a stochastic driver of the climate system. And so this is illustrated in the famous stochastic climate model by Hasselmann, one of the main papers for which he got the Nobel Prize in physics several years ago. And so the idea is essentially climate is nothing else but the weighted time integral of random weather fluctuations. So you can say, well, maybe if we think about culture, culture is something quite similar. So you can also take a similar mathematical approach and say, well, culture is essentially the weighted time integral of state-dependent stochastic innovations. Why state-dependent? Because the amount of innovation depends also on the population size. We are cultural learners. So that makes it mathematically very interesting. And Abdul Vasai from our center will also talk about this simulation of culture, actually. And of course there is a feedback. Then the last example from our center, which you will get some more information about, is the ICCP Global Mammal Model. So we were able to build a mathematical model for 2,233 mammal species, which we simulate explicitly on our planet. Here you can see reindeer and mammoth, and they respond to changes in vegetation. And essentially we have the representation of competition and also predator-prey relationships included. So this is a wonderful tool not only to understand the past but also the future. How do humans through land use change and climate change influence the habitats and also the biomass of some of our species on our planet. So this is my final slide. It's just a wonderful opportunity, and I hope this conference provides the platform for these discussions and conversations to really bring different groups together and merge fields such as biology, paleobiology, paleoclimate, archaeology, paleoanthropology, and paleogenomics to really get a better understanding, but also to build new quantitative models, integrative models of climate, humans, and genetics. So this is a wonderful possibility for young scientists to work on something rather new, something that may be transformative in terms of understanding well, who we are and why we are who we are. So I think, so let's begin our journey. And we can go straight to the first session that will be chaired by Reneke.